So I'm here to talk to you about blockchain technology. It's something most people don't understand. And so I like to take you back in time just to set the context, because we all understand the internet today. But it wasn't that long ago that very few people understood what that is. And here's how I like to start this conversation.
56 past. I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Mm-hmm. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around.
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard around or about in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know. What do you
is
say
internet
that, Allison?
anyway?
Internet is that
Massive computer network.
Mm-hmm. The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a
look in the
computer
dictionary.
billboard.
It's not in it.
So I like to start here because we all understand the internet and we use it. It's pervasive in all of our lives every day today. And I think that blockchain technology is essentially where the internet was in, call it 1994. This is also an article from Newsweek in 1995 talking about how the internet's going to fail, and essentially it's only used by criminals, and that it's a passing fad, and it's going to go away. And I think that this is a useful set of context because, what have you heard about Bitcoin? You've probably heard it's insecure. You've heard of this company, Mt. Gox, that failed and hundreds of millions of dollars disappeared. Well, the underlying protocol has never been hacked. It is the most secure system the world has ever seen. If you take all of Google's global infrastructure, times 100, that's the kind of security or hashing. It's over an exaflop, the Bitcoin network. So it's the most secure system the world has ever seen. Those companies that failed were essentially banks that left their vaults open. You've also probably heard that it's used by criminals. You may have heard of this thing called the Silk Road. Much like the internet was only used for bad things. That's not really the case. Yes, there are some bad things done with this. Any new technology is going to have a yin and a yang. You're going to see good uses and bad uses. And as the technology develops, the, call it early fringe users become a minority, and the, call it mainstream adopters end up using it for better things. And so most of the world's top thought leaders, venture capitalists, academics have all said there's tons of merit to this technology, and there's more there than that. And you've also maybe heard, that Bitcoin went up to 1,000 and the price has gone down and it's probably going away. The reality is that it's growing exponentially. Every single metric, if you look at it closely, aside from price, which is kind of the primary barometer of sentiment, which is the data that most of you operate off of, every metric is up and to the right. So what is Bitcoin? It's digital value, it's fixed supply, it's programmable. It's a decentralized network, which means there's no governing body, there's no central authority, it's peer-to-peer, which means you can't shut it down. The only way to shut off Bitcoin is to shut off the internet indefinitely. And it's an incorruptible public ledger. You can't counterfeit money. So you'd say, well, why now? What is this? Is it something new? So for the last 30 years, people have talked about building a system like this, but no one could figure out how. So if you were studying to become a PhD in cryptography, computer science, mathematics, it's very likely that you encountered this concept of the Byzantine generals problem, better described as a double spend. So the protocols that make up the internet, TCP, IP, and such, don't allow for you to create unique assets or individual data. So for example, if I were going to send you an email with a picture attached to it, or money, when you receive that email, how do you know I didn't keep a copy for myself or send it to 10 other people simultaneously? This is the reason why piracy is a problem. And so Bitcoin's creator solved this incredibly complex problem by creating a shared database or a distributed ledger. So this is something new, and for the first time in human history, I can now transmit value from one person to another anywhere in the world with no middleman, with complete transparency. It's instant, and the fees are negligible, and it's a very big deal. I mean, historically, you've always had to have a trusted intermediary or counterparty in the middle of every transaction, including those on the internet. So Bitcoin was the first application, and I'm not really here to talk to you about that. I'm here to talk to you about blockchain technology. So think of the blockchain as the technology that makes Bitcoin possible, and Bitcoin is the first application. So again, think of the blockchain as the operating system, and Bitcoin is now one of about 700 apps that are trying to create innovation around this space, and you're starting to see lots of major institutions use it. But I want to take us through kind of what I think of as the evolution of kind of technology as it relates to what is disrupting the world. In this case, we used to communicate with people verbally, and that was the verbal sort of communication era. Telecommunications enabled us to have synchronous communications with other people around the world. And obviously, a lot of interesting things happened as a result of that. The internet allowed us to have asynchronous and scalable communications with people around the world. And so I think of all of this as kind of the internet we use today as the internet of information. The blockchain is enabling the internet of value. So I can now transmit value in the same way that we can transmit data, again, on a peer-to-peer basis. And I think this is going to be hugely disruptive, not just to things like finance. So there's 3 types of blockchains, or 2 specific that I'm going to talk about. So the current system is built upon centralized ledgers, and if we use this as a database concept, I have a database, you each have a database, and I don't trust your data, you don't trust my data, and that's how the world sort of functions today, and that's why you have counterparty risk. What the Bitcoin network or blockchain, public blockchain is it's a giant, dumb shared database. Think of it like a Google Doc or an Excel file that essentially is being replicated across millions of computers all over the world. And because we're all sharing a database, instead of all having our own individual databases, I don't need to know you or trust you to rely upon that data. And so Bitcoin's blockchain or some of these other public blockchains are these giant shared databases that